Wisconsin defeats Middle Tennessee 42-10 to improve to 2-0 on the season. Colin, I'm sitting in the press box yesterday, and in the first half, I'm ready to go all scorched earth. I'm reading the game thread, and some people are really looking forward to this podcast or my stuff after the game, and I kind of joked that Wisconsin's going to put them away in the second half, and it's going to push all those feelings down. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Second half, was about as good as you can expect from this team, and this program in general. We'll touch on that later, and I'll let you go first after this game, or after this. 2.5 quarters. It was kind of same old. It's tough to watch. Last 1.5 quarters, like I said, that's exactly what it should look like. Coming out of this game, how are you just feeling, when you put the whole 4 quarters together?
I think you and I were on the same page in those first 2.5 quarters of what are we going to talk about and like what issues are going to be needed to be fixed going into a humongous game and a humongous jump from Middle Tennessee to the University of Alabama. But then, you kind of see what you wanted to see for 4 quarters, right? In that next quarter and a half, to end the game. And I think that that's a very positive thing, though, to have to end the game that way instead of the roles reversed, right? To where, you're kind of letting them back in the game. It becomes more of a dogfight after a dominant performance at the beginning of the game. So I think that's very encouraging. I think Badger fans should be a lot more positive from that standpoint relative to all, probably the largest boos that I've heard, I think, going into halftime,
Right.
Which, rightfully so, not wrong. I was very concerned as well going into really the middle of the third quarter. And then, but it was great to see them turn it around. And you want to be in these games by the end of the game, getting guys who may not be getting reps right now, but possibly later in the season, or you need them at depth. It's good to see young guys get in the game, make plays for that last drive, So I think that's kind of being in control by the end of the game is what you wanted to be at, and that's where they were.
So I had just too much written down to kind of let it go to waste. So here's where I'm kind of at. If you do something good, I want to be the first one to pat you on the back. If you need a kick in the ass, I think I should go get my boots on. And I know you and I talked about this off air, I think, before last week's show, where these games 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, you just used to breeze right through them. You didn't think too much about them. And, I remember 2013, I think it was, I was early in this, just getting started, and, fans were kind of after me because I was raving about a 56-0 win over UMass, I think it was. And I'm like, well, that's what good teams do. That's exactly how it should look. I'm not saying it's going to carry over to Ohio State or whoever, but, everyone did their jobs, and it's an A effort. And now I'm sitting here at this stage, we're in year 3 of this thing, and I'm trying to find silver linings against Middle Tennessee, who mind you, a week ago got their doors blown off by FCS Austin Peay, who, by the way, hung in there with Georgia for 4 quarters and relatively made it a game on the road. What if that opponent was Austin Peay yesterday? Does anyone really want to answer that question? I talked to Tackett Curtis after this game, and I just wanted to clarify some of the comments he made. And, he kind of made it clear, they played down in their competition, maybe didn't take them as seriously as you thought that they should have. Definitely didn't play with the energy in the first half. And I'm starting to think, like, where does this come from? Why is this program in a position where they shouldn't be coming out with their hair on fire, and every win shouldn't be played with this utter desperation, especially when you're fighting for, what a lot of people think is your head coach's job and the jobs of a lot of his assistants too. You look at this non-conference history under Luke Fickell so far. Buffalo, 1-possession game at half. Lost to Washington State on the road. Georgia Southern, 1-possession game at half. Last year, South Dakota, Western Michigan, both 4-quarter games that they could have very easily lost. Blown out against Alabama. 4-quarter game, essentially, against Miami of Ohio last week. In your opinion, I don't know, could you put your finger on it as to why, you're not coming out trying to take care of business right away and get this thing going? Because, you guys just aren't, not you guys, but, Wisconsin in general is just not good enough to kind of take that attitude into any single game.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's been a common occurrence, and people can probably even argue from the 2020 and on of something about Wisconsin football playing to their competition, whether it's down or up. I think that can be argued since then. But even at this point now, like you said, your coach's job is on the line. And I think from a leadership standpoint, it has to be made very clear to these players too. If, hey, do you love Coach Fickle? Do you love this staff? Do you want
Right.
them to be here next year? Well, we got to win games, and we got to win these type of games, right? And I think just going, this is what I was going to hit on eventually anyway, but they did great things adjusting and actually finding a way to dominate the game by the end of the game and being
Absolutely.
who the fans want them to be by the end of the game. Now, at the beginning and those first 2.5 quarters, you cannot afford to do that against a University of Alabama next week. You cannot afford a slow start because they will keep the foot on the gas, and it'll be too late to wake up in those type of games, right? So
Right.
that's where there are concerns still, right? Like you got to be able to have a complete game against these type of guys that we're going to see in the next several weeks. So there's a lot of positives to it, but no, you're exactly right. You're not wrong about the slow starts and the urgency that's needed, and that starts with leadership. And I mean, it starts from the top down of leadership from Coach Fickle all the way down. But from a player standpoint, it starts with leadership of having a fire from the start, and you want to have that as quickly as possible, especially in these games.
And listen, I've seen some seasons with slow non-conference starts that have turned it around. But for me, since 2020, this thing has kind of been going downhill. Maybe not in a straight line. There have been some bright moments, especially before you left, but especially the last 3 years. We're kind of on the precipice here of maybe not being able to get back to where Wisconsin was. And listen, like you said, it was a really good second half. I don't think you can ask for much better for what went down in that last 1.5 quarters, and maybe that sparks the team the rest of the way. But the other side of this too is now we're in an era where you have to pay half or more of your players just to be here. Right. I mean, that's just the world we live in. Half these
Yeah,
guys are getting
yeah,
paid. There's a good amount of Wisconsin kids that would do it for free. The reality is more than half are getting a paycheck. And, every player for the most part, unless you're Matt Young, who grew up in Neenah and, was a Division III player last year and grew up dreaming for the Badgers, you had to pay them to come here. So for me, and I understand the fans' frustration because now you're writing checks, and a lot of the fans are paying for this out of the pocket, whether they're going to buy Varsity Ale, buying tickets, signing up for Badger Connect, whatever it is. They're paying for this product too, and for me, I can understand losing games. There's certain ways they're just okay with losing games, but for me, it's just not being desperate at a time where it feels like you should be desperate. I think rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a huge storm for fans to be upset about. Clearly, from the change um, of head coaches all the way to now of the point of needing wins, and then you add in NIL, you add in unloyal players who are there, big playmakers. I'm sure that are there for the money more than they are for wanting to play for the program. That's just the day and age that we're living in, sadly. So I can imagine and I can understand the frustration for fans. I didn't disagree with the booze at going into halftime. I mean, it's
Right.
part of it, and it's what you sign up for as a player and to be on this team. But um, I think that there are, from a positive standpoint, it's a great way to end the game to go into a big game coming up next week. So taking the pros and the cons together, but I'd rather them end hot than end cold from that game, which I'm happy about.
So let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about that second half. Eventually, Middle Tennessee State does what bad teams do. They unravel a little bit. They commit some just egregious mistakes. The interception to Emilio Agard, even he was like, I can't believe the guy threw that ball. And then obviously they had that roughing the passer on a 3rd and 34 on a tight end screen. I'm not sure how that happens, but either way, Christian Allegro comes up with that big 4th down stop. From there, it's just pedal to the metal. Badgers outgame Middle Tennessee 277-40. Wisconsin offense scores on 4 consecutive drives to put that thing away. Blue Raiders had 5 more drives, none of which went longer than 5 plays. There were 2, 3 and outs during that stretch, and it kind of felt like old times again, didn't it? I mean, UW's offense was doing whatever they wanted to do. No resistance from the defense. Felt like they kind of broke their will in that second half. Defense pinning their ears back and go. 4 of their 5 sacks came during that stretch, and then you felt the crowd get behind them again on every third down and every big play they made.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fun when jump around is going on and there's
Yeah.
domination in the game, let alone winning the game. When that sideline is jumping around, having fun, flying around, staying loose, you want that type of mindset every game from the first quarter all the way through the fourth, right? But it was great to see. And going back on getting young guys in the game and what we talked about, a few episodes ago from just gaining confidence for these guys who are new in the system, maybe guys who may not be playing much but get a chance to play in these games, and who may have to step up later on in the season. Uh, there is a lot of positives with that, right? And so everything that we wanted to see out of these type of games and non-power five games in this competition, that's what the product we got by the end of the game.
How big are those reps? You probably remember being a young guy, eyes wide open, whether it was at Houston or Wisconsin when you got in for the first time. In my profession, we kind of call it garbage time, mop up duty. Don't pay much attention to it. But if you're a player, how valuable are those for your future? Just stepping on the field, getting a feel for what it's like out there, and maybe just experiencing the speed of that game.
As a player, that's huge to be able to experience the game speed, right? And to be able to go out there and make plays. You may not be playing against possibly, the best competition of the year, but you're out there and you're playing college ball. And as a player, first time playing out there, wearing the Wisconsin uniform, you're excited to be playing college football. And then once you start making plays in that, and you get a whole different change of confidence from just not only making plays in practice, but now you're doing it in games. That's a big
Yeah.
difference for guys with their confidence. And then when you want to add as well, just being able to be in the system consistently, it's way different from slowing it down in practice to having to produce it in a game. So being able to do that for those guys, giving those guys an opportunity, again, it's key for even the future, maybe this season or next season. But it's big for those guys and keeping them happy.
Another big bright spot on Saturday, Danny O'Neal. I mean, I don't think anyone could have envisioned the way he would exceed expectations in his first start for Wisconsin. Obviously, he had 11 starts there at San Diego State. This is a little bit different animal here with the Badgers. 23 of 27, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. Had the 1 pick, which was pretty much a fluke play and not really on his shoulders. On that little screen to Dylan Jones where he ran into Joe Brunner there and the ball pops up to Middle Tennessee. But, I mean, you talk about a guy that steps in for Billy Edwards, not on short notice, had a whole week to prepare, but he was good a week ago against Miami of Ohio as well. Comes out and throws for the most yards in a Wisconsin debut since 1951. Had the most touchdown passes in a Wisconsin starting debut since Graham Mertz in 2020. You probably remember that game a little bit. And highest completion percentage by a Wisconsin quarterback in their starting debut since Mertz in 2022. Some people are kind of calling for a quarterback controversy. I've seen too much in fall camp to go that way, but man, it's hard to take a guy out like that when he's rolling, isn't it?
Yeah, that's going to be tough, for whoever's going to not see the field next week, right? Especially if you're Danny O'Neal and you end up not being out there. You end, which is great. You end on a high note, and you're like, "Hey, coaches, this is what I can do. I'm reliable. You can put me in there when needed." Um, but when you have the hot hand like that, and then you have to sit back and cool down, possibly with Billy, coming back and getting healthy, it's part of it. But it's hard. But as a backup or as a two in those situations, you want to have that or instill that confidence in your coaches that they can trust you, right? And you want to be pushing that competition. The way that he's playing right now should force Billy to up his play as well. And that's what the great part about having two guys that can play is making each other better throughout the week and throughout as the weeks to come. So it's definitely good for the Badgers to have two guys competing like that and forcing each other to get better.
Do you see enough where, let's say, Billy is 75% healthy, can go out there and play and maybe bring his B game at best. Obviously, he would need an A game to beat an Alabama. But did you see enough from Danny O'Neil where you say, okay, if I don't have Billy at 100%, I'm rolling with him and taking my shot, even in a place like Tuscaloosa?
You have to. I feel like if Billy's like, hey, I don't know if I can be 100%. We don't know Billy's
Right.
80% in this offense. I mean, we know he's had plenty of play time, at Maryland, but we don't know that. What is that 80% in this offense? We don't know. So the coaches would be rolling the dice, and they're involved during the week. They see how these guys look throughout the week. They'll know more than us, but have a guy who just put up the numbers that Danny O'Neil did. He's confident. He's ready to go back and go take on the world, in the next week. So you wouldn't be wrong to put him in. And you got to be able to make those type of decisions in big games like this, and be confident in it as a coach.
So the offense as a whole, felt like it took some steps forward, even when they weren't putting points on the board in the first half. They were moving the ball a little bit, avoiding third and longs, avoiding 3-and-outs. A lot of offense is so much rhythm and timing, and that's one thing I feel like Danny O'Neil's really got going for him. And I think there's something to be said. Maybe he doesn't make the most miraculous throws out there for the most part, although the touchdown pass to Lance Mason was just gorgeous at the end of the fourth quarter there. But the one thing I do feel like he does have is a really good command of this offense and understanding of where the ball needs to go and to get it out in a hurry. And a lot of that, I think, is what Jeff Grimes is doing. We've talked about it the last two episodes, why I like him as an offensive coordinator. I think he takes a lot of weight off the shoulders of the quarterback. And if you look at the Pro Football Focus analytics, if I don't love the grades and all that, but I do love some of the other stuff they track, which is essentially for quarterbacks, big time throws and how many times receivers have to make contested catches. Only one big time throw out of his 23 completions, which I'm assuming was the one to Mason. And Chris Brooks had the only real difficult catch on the day. Everything that came for him felt fairly organic in the offense. He wasn't standing in the pocket having to think and beat defenses with his mind. Does that does Saturday's performance, I guess, make you a little more of a believer in Jeff Grimes? Just seeing how many yards O'Neil was able to throw for, how efficient he had to be, and it felt like he just wasn't stressed all day.
Yeah, I think they did a great job mixing up the formations, moving guys around. I mean, we have two technically gadget receivers back there
Right.
with 2 and 8, right? So
Yep.
those two guys being able
I'd
to
throw
use
Henry
both of those.
Henry in that too.
Well, yeah, you can throw him in there too. I mean, he scored. Oh, he had the first touchdown of the game. So
They get him on a lot of end arounds and jet sweeps and
right,
stuff.
but even using that helps a quarterback so much by being able to mess with the defense when you have not only two, like you said, three different guys that you can move around and motion around. As a defense, if you see one of those guys in there, you're kind of counting on him moving around. But if you have both two guys in there like that, it can take a little bit of pressure off Danny O'Neil in those situations. So, but going back to just mixing up the offense, being able to have different formations, having moving those guys around, I thought he got real creative with a few plays, and not also showing too much. Going into the meat of the season here. So I thought that it was very positive from an offensive standpoint once they got rolling, and being able to push through that adversity of getting hit in the mouth, for 2.5 quarters and really trying to figure out their stride. And they did.
Is it too much though? I mean, one criticism I have of him is I think he does get too cute at times and doesn't strike that balance of just playing straightforward football and trying to catch everybody by surprise. I mean, yeah, the run game wasn't working on Saturday. He had to go to different options, but you look at that first drive, they came out in this sort of sneaky formation, everyone bunched together, and then they all take off to the line of scrimmage. It leads to a toss that goes nowhere. And then the very next play, you go end around to Henry. I think that gets a couple yards, and then you're in one of those third and longs you don't want to be in. coaches spend more time than any of us know on these game plans. I mean, there's always a method to the madness that a lot of us just aren't going to understand. So I never like picking apart game plans from that perspective because he's watched countless hours of film on Middle Tennessee. He knows his guys better than I ever will. But I don't know. To me, that there's a game flow that's going on, and like I said, you're moving the ball relatively well all game long. I don't need shovel passes to my tight end yesterday. It just felt like a little much at times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, taking the good with the bad with that. I mean, the cons from that is there's no stability at times when you want to kind of get in a rhythm of certain plays and certain formations, and
Yeah.
kind of your bread and butter is your bread and butter, especially in those games. But then from the other standpoint is this may be their chance to try this out in the game. Let's try out, this quick huddle. Let's try out these certain formations and shifts and motions, and these shovel passes that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But if we have the look and we want to try it out, this is the time to do it. Rather than just repping out in practice all the time, right?
Yeah.
And then from a preparation standpoint, Alabama's now watching this, and that's one thing that they have to
Okay.
prepare for. Maybe they'll throw this in there. I know as a former analyst, for a college football team, we're drawing up those cards at night. That's extra late hours drawing up more plays and preparation, and you're spending limited time in practice having to prepare for those things. So from a positive standpoint in that, I think that's going to be fine. I think that works out in our favor, but eventually, right, you got to find your rhythm and your bread and butter.
And eventually, Wisconsin's got to be able to run the football. I think that's maybe you're with me on this. I think that's the biggest concern going into Alabama is that through two games you have not been able to run against inferior opponents. Wisconsin's top three tailbacks, 76 yards on 20 carries. They were outgained 20-17 at the half, despite running the ball 5 more times. Middle Tennessee had 7.5 tackles for loss at the half. None of those came by sacks. Now, Wisconsin supplemented the run game through their receivers. Tretch and Vinny Anthony are the two biggest running plays of the game, both touchdowns. I like Tretch. I'm glad Wisconsin's using him in the way that they should. But Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, they've got 15 of them. And that East-West stuff might get you a player here or there in those games. But I think eventually you're going to have to be able to lean on this run game if you're Wisconsin. That's how you slay the big dogs. You control the clock. You wear them down over 4 quarters. Unless I'm missing something, I think that's the biggest concern of this team right now.
Yeah, I don't know how many fans have noticed, but we've thrown the ball at this point in the season relative. You go back to Wisconsin's old school
Yeah.
offense, right? We've thrown the ball way more than we have ran the ball in that balance of the run pass, right? So that's very interesting to me. Maybe it's because we haven't been able to really run the ball and dominate, these opponents yet. So that is definitely a red flag going into University of Alabama because, like you said, those east-west runs, those reverses and end arounds and all those things, maybe in gotta have it situations, or maybe to throw them off 1 or 2 times a game that could work, but you can't rely on that for your home runs, right? And to be able to wear your defenses down. So the backs are talented. We got talented backs. We got a veteran fullback who's played a lot of ball as well. So I think there shouldn't be issues unless we're talking about up front now of maybe something that I don't see. But I don't know if you noticed as well that we moved around the offensive line, and we talked about what we
Yeah.
would do in those situations, and the coaching staff ended up moving those guys around, putting Riley Mahlman at left tackle. But we'll see. I mean, there's no positives yet to be able to show that we can dominate on the ground. And then going into Alabama, that's a tough question mark to have.
Do you stick with it? I wanted to end with this a little bit, but I remember Paul Chryst days. If they weren't running the ball well, I mean he was almost determined at times, and I think I drove some people crazy. He was hell or high water. Sometimes I'm just I have to set a tone. I have to get the confidence in that run game so we can lean on it in November when we need it. You mentioned the passing numbers are a little high. I don't know. It feels like kind of a give and take. You could go either way. I think a lot of fans are thrilled with how well Wisconsin's been passing the ball. They haven't been
Yeah,
able to do that a lot, but at the same
yeah.
time, does it all eventually come back to the run game no matter what?
Eventually, you're gonna have to rely on it. In these big games, you can't be throwing the ball as often as we kind of want to expect to, and if it doesn't work, or if we need to control the clock, we need to be able to run the clock down to for situational football. You have to rely on that run game in big games like what we're going to see in the next several weeks. So they got to find it. They got to find it somewhere, and the talent is there. So I hope that they can find it. I'm a firm believer in the run game that it can open up and will open up. But
Mhm.
and if that's the case, I mean, at least we're throwing the ball really well too right now. So
Right.
maybe it's just in due time that things all come together. But it is a different story than what we've seen in the last bits of the old school way of Wisconsin offense.
So let's focus on Luke Fickell a little bit. I didn't like the fourth down call in week one. Didn't work out. Kind of shifted my thinking a little bit, but had a good one on Saturday. That's one. Yeah, I think it was a 12-play drive. You risk not getting anything at all, and that would have really taken the air out of the tires in that one if they don't get that touchdown to Tyrell Henry.
Mm-hmm.
So big call by him. Great execution by the team, and obviously shows a lot of faith in Danny O'Neil there. A lot of people had some things to say about the way that first half ended, and I just wanted to get your thoughts. If you didn't watch a game or whatever, I'll kind of break it down here a little bit. But we'll start with the screen that ended up being an interception. Middle Tennessee turns it into a touchdown. I didn't have a problem with the call. It felt, and I know I said, Grimes can be too cute at times. I don't know, a screen over the middle to your tailback feels kind of safe to me. It's a good way to start your drive with a first down and stop the clock, especially if Middle Tennessee is going to continuously bring pressure. I don't know. I didn't hate the call itself. It kind of just felt like a fluke to me.
Yeah, I think they just didn't execute it well as an offense for Wisconsin. I mean, because it ended up being a freak bounce and it kind of landed right in the D
Right.
lineman's hand. Those are the type of plays, if you're going to throw in traffic like that, you have to probably be very careful and very detailed to execute the play. Being loose with the football like that could create those type of things, the ricochets, and just they get a gift. So I wouldn't, I agree with you. I wouldn't panic about it. Proper execution fixes that. And a lot of the time that ball hits a foot or a leg and it's on the ground and
Yeah.
incomplete. We live to see another day. So I wouldn't count that as that's a consistent issue that could come up. But again, going back to creativity, seeing things that you may not have seen in the game yet that you want to see out of your offense. These are the games that do it. So if you want to
Okay.
make that mistake now, let's rinse it out now before these games come up in the next several
Right.
weeks.
The one I think a lot of people have more problems with, I should say, is leaving the end of that first half with 3 timeouts in your pocket. Now you get the ball back with a minute left. I forgot. I should have looked at the drive tarp. I believe first play didn't go their way. Then Jones rips off a nice 13-yard run. You're at your own 41-yard line with 3 timeouts, and I forget how much time was left. But either way, you're one throw away from getting this thing in field goal range. I can see the side of it that maybe you just made a mistake. Let's just get into the locker room and avoid another one. On the other hand, you have 3 timeouts and you're one throw away from field goal range in a one-score game. What did you just make of sitting on those?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was worried that this team at that point in time, before they turned it on in the second half, was they were not playing to win the game. They were just playing to not lose. And that seemed like a kind of cherry on top of how that first half was. Is these guys aren't cutting it loose; they're playing to not lose instead of playing to win the game. If that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
because from those two different standpoints, you got one, you're playing with your hair on fire and you're playing fast, you're playing confident, you trust the coaching, you trust the preparation. And the other hand is, oh, let's just not make a mistake. Let's not, let's play this safe here. There's a lot of characteristics of that in play style and in coaching the game throughout the game, right? So I saw that go hand in hand at the end of the first half, and I'm like, golly, these guys are playing to not lose against Middle Tennessee. We can't be affording this going into the gauntlet that they're going to have in the next weeks. So I was fired up about that personally. I'm sure like the rest of the fans.
So you mentioned you're feeling a lot better after that second half, and I think anybody would be crazy not to. This is the first time in non-conference. I really should say this is the first time in the Fickle era outside of that 3-game run, where they beat down the Big Ten bottom feeders of Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue, and handled those 3 games, that they've looked this good. And so, from a standpoint of I don't care who it's against, I said this before the season, they just needed to be dominant and have that confidence going into Alabama and what's ahead on this schedule. I didn't care who it was against. Something I thought of today. I don't know if it's a red flag. It's a green flag right now. And one thing I think that concerns me, and you can tell me if I'm making too much out of this, and this is going to sound dumb at first, but Wisconsin's been very clean and relatively largely mistake free or killer mistake free, which is good, right? That's what you want, but you're struggling. And I can't help but think, okay, you're penalty free for the first time in a game since 2016. That's really hard to do. Obviously, it hasn't happened in almost 10 years. Where's the blowout wins in these games? And they had a lot of those last year where, you can look at certain losses or games you didn't play well and look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, we committed 10 penalties, or we had 3 turnovers, or we were missing tackles. All those numbers are very low. Does that speak to a talent issue? Am I making too much out of it? That the fact that you're doing the things you can control and you're still not necessarily handling inferior competition?
People could see it that way. I think we have a lot of talent on the team. I think we've just been more of a bend don't break mentality on both sides of the football. So you have one side that's holding their ground on defense, then one that's trying to just chip away throughout a drive, but they're not finishing drives. So when you're not finishing drives and, the defense is bend don't break, and, if you get a turnover, they're in a good field position, or they give up, a few big plays on some drives like what happened yesterday. Well, eventually it just doesn't turn into a blowout, turns into a dogfight. So I think the bend don't break mentality that's possibly going on right now is kind of what you're questioning with could be possibly the talent. I think this is a talented group. I think most people could agree. I mean, I'm sure you agree too that this is a talented group from what you've seen in a lot of areas.
Oh,
So
I think on paper, the last 3 years, they've been more talented than maybe 75% of the opponents.
yeah,
I don't think this is Fickle's most talented team, but I don't know where to start when you're doing the things that should lead to wins and resounding wins, and you're not necessarily getting them. It's hard to point. Okay, well, why is that happening? Because Middle Tennessee, yeah, you won 42-10, but obviously they're considered one of the worst teams in college football. I don't think Miami of Ohio is going to be a necessarily great team. It's just hard to point a finger or put a finger on necessarily what's happening, other than maybe, like you said, some sort of mentality shift of, okay, we're not going out there to necessarily win games. We're playing not to lose. And because of that, we're not committing errors, but we're not necessarily making things happen either. I think that makes sense.
yeah. I think playing not to make a mistake will definitely slow you down. And with a talented team like this, if you're playing with that mentality, well, you still might win the game, but it's not going to be in dominant fashion. But I will say this: what we wanted to see out of this Wisconsin team against Middle Tennessee, we did see in the second half. It just took a,
Yeah.
a while to get going. Um, so I think that it is there, and I hope that they found it. But whatever that we wanted to see out of the team going into Alabama, we got to see it in the second half. And I think fans should be positive of that. But there's nothing more that they can do for you to feel confident going into Alabama at this point. I don't think there's anything more that they could have done after they adjusted in the second half for fans to feel more confident than what they can be. Like, our team is what they are going into this big game, playing at the best level that they could possibly be playing at to finish that game. That's my opinion, because Middle Tennessee, you still can't get a feel on who Wisconsin is until
Right.
we start playing these games.
From your perspective, I know your seasons were kind of different, especially in 2021, where you opened up with a marquee opponent in Penn State. But these first big tests where you don't exactly know who you are yet or what you've got, as a player, what's the mentality going into those games where, you know, all the eyes of Wisconsin, are going to be on you. There's a ton of pressure, especially when you're doing it on the road as a group for the first time. I know you didn't necessarily have to experience it in the transfer portal era where, you're looking at the guy next to you and you don't know if you can trust him yet. You don't know necessarily how to play together. But from your perspective as a player, what's that first, big game, big test like? When you're walking into a kind of a little unknown situation in terms of, okay, are we really as good as we think we are?
I think you're extremely excited to be playing these games. You should be, because this is why you came to Wisconsin. A lot of players who may have been under recruited or whatever it might have been, you chose Wisconsin because it's big boy Big Ten ball that's going to compete in the Big Ten. That's what majority of those recruits, at least when we came in, that's how that mindset was. So when we got to play these big games, and all these alums that have played in the big games before us were there, and
Yeah.
they're in the locker room, they're on the sideline. I looked at them like, I want to be just like you. I want to play in these big games. I want to make big plays in these games and be able to make you proud. So you're excited. You should be fired up. It should be a different type of energy into the building this week. At least I hope so, because being able to value why you came here in the first place, well, you're playing the best. And this is why you should be here at Wisconsin, why you should be playing here. So I hope it's that urgency. I hope it's that juice and that energy. I hope leadership is kind of takes the step up, and they maintain that standard of whatever this energy is this week, maintain it throughout the season.
What did that 2019 Michigan game just do for you guys from a momentum standpoint? And did you know going into that a beatdown was about to take place? I mean, could you already sense it?
We never really liked or respected Michigan. We respected them as a tradition, and they got good players, but we don't like them. We don't. We think that they're entitled. Personally, we think that they're they have this kind of uh, pretty boy mentality where we're blue collared and this is who we are. We'll bring our lunch pail and hard hat to work. This is that type of mentality versus versus the pretty boy mentality. That's kind of just how we saw it. So we had a chip on our shoulder going into the game, and we did what we wanted to do, what we expected to do. So being able to see that, hey, we can do this, we can be this dominant against these teams, it's a huge confidence boost, because you are what you really think that you are.
All right, Wisconsin going to Alabama on Saturday. I know you said you'll be down there, so if you need some, have you ever tailgated a Badger game before?
I've never tailgated a Badger game.
Okay,
It's my
well you're in
first
for
one.
yeah, you better bring it. That's all I gotta say. There's some. These guys are a different breed in Wisconsin. Who's ever, especially those, if you're going to make the trip to Alabama, there's going to be some real ones down there. But Alabama opens up as a 19 and a half or a 21 point favorite, depending on who you're looking at here. Real quick, what do you hang your hat on if you're Wisconsin going into this game? Obviously, I think it's fair to say they need a superhuman effort. They need the best effort that they've had in the Luke Fickell era to pull this one off. But if there's one thing they're capable of going down there and beating Alabama with, based on what you've seen in these first two games, what is it?
One is, from what I've seen in the positives for us, I think one is our defense creating turnovers to set up our offense. Whether the offense is playing well or not in this game, the defense is going to have to make some big plays. And another thing, special teams has been clean. Keep it clean on special teams. Special teams and turnovers are going to be the key for this game. Being able to take care of the football and take the ball away is going to be huge.
Who would you rather be? I'm always torn on this. Sometimes I like teams that have a loss because I think you learn more from your losses. It exposes your flaws, and Florida State certainly exposed Alabama. That probably lights a fire under them, forces them to look inward. or would you rather be them going into this game? Let's just say the teams are even. Would you rather be them, who's already experienced a loss, or would you rather be Wisconsin, who's 2-0, maybe hasn't been hit in the mouth, probably playing with a little bit more confidence and assure of themselves?
I think Alabama's in a great position. Just being honest, they're in a
Okay.
great position because they did experience a loss. They've had to work through that. They've had to have a different mentality going into the next week, and they won 73-0. They kind of caught stride again. Their quarterback was 16 for 16 through the whole game,
Yeah.
100% completion percentage. So they kind of caught their stride, and they kind of wiped the blood from their mouth and said, "Hey, we're back. We're going to be all right." I know that locker room was probably thinking that, and that coaching staff. And I mean, we feel the heat in Wisconsin with Luke Fickell. I mean, there was one loss over there with their head coach, and I mean, they want to take his head. So there's urgency, I think, on both sides of this program right now. But what I really like out of Wisconsin, though, is yes, we're 2-0, but also hate to say it against these two teams, but we have been hit in the mouth and we've had to adjust, and we did see Wisconsin adjust and handle their adversity in the last game and be able to play at a high level. So that's a positive from a mindset and the leadership, I think, from Wisconsin being able to climb out of that, right? Out of that route. But they're going to have to dig deep from some adversity during this game because it's going to be haymakers thrown all night.
Wisconsin can take a nothing to lose mentality down there. Everybody expects them to lose. Not only that, everyone expects them to lose badly, probably, except everybody inside that locker room. Lost badly a year ago as well. How dangerous can a team be, when they kind of let that pressure get away from them in a game like this, where, like I said, you can go down there, play fast and free, nothing to lose. You get to experience one of the great environments of college football. I don't want to call it a vacation. It's still a business trip. I mean, there's a lot on the line, but obviously it's a non-conference game against a ranked opponent. It's not going to kill Wisconsin for anything long-term. Can a team be a little more dangerous when, you just stop maybe caring about what the outside noise is or what the narrative is about you anymore?
It can help you a ton if you really just cut it loose and you say, you know what, I'm just going to go play Wisconsin football with my boys, do what I'm coached to do, and do my job. I don't care who's in the stands watching me. I don't care what they're saying about me on Twitter or whatever it might be. And you just go out there and you play ball.
You mean you
It
don't
can,
care about what Colin Wilder's saying on the podcast?
yeah, don't care about what I'm
That's
saying right
right.
now. I mean, nobody listening to me. Go out there and go make plays and go do what you do. Um, so there's definitely some positives that can go into that mindset. Um, and I think also just no matter what happens this game, you're playing the University of Alabama. Nick Saban has a statue out in front of there. They're going to respect me. That would be my mindset of no matter what the score is, I want them to feel that their bell was rung from me. And I want them to walk off the field and say, hey, these guys, these guys brought it to us. I respect them. At the end of the day, I want the University of Alabama as a player and as a program to respect the product on the field.
I think you kind of answered my next question, but I was going to ask, what do you think the approach here is for Wisconsin, or the right approach? Play conservative, try and drag them through the mud in a dogfight and keep it close, and make sure you're in that game or the fourth quarter, or come out swinging, take your shots, and see what happens.
I think as a coach, you can't go necessarily just swing for swing necessarily on mano a mano with the University of Alabama. We got to be able to
Okay.
control the game, control the clock, do what we do very, very well. Up to this point, the coaches need to figure out what do we do really, really well, and we need to go do that. We can't go and try out new things against a team like this because if it doesn't work, they'll make us pay. And then I think that Wisconsin doing a great job last week making Middle Tennessee pay on mistakes. Whatever Alabama gives us, we got to make them pay for it. So I think taking advantage of the opportunities that are given from Alabama
Yeah.
and doing what we do really well. So that may sound a little conservative, but don't go out of your realm of what you don't do to win this game, in my opinion.
It's not apples and oranges, but I've been thinking a lot about the 2021 Big Ten championship game that you guys played in, just from a big picture standpoint of how to approach this game. And one thing I loved about that game, though, is and it probably helped that you played them already early in the season and lost and learned some things. But to me, that the program always kind of had that mindset of, in these big games, drag them through the mud and just try and be around in the fourth quarter. And I heard that from a lot of coaches' mouths. Just try and be around in the fourth quarter. But that game, I don't think you beat a team like Alabama or Ohio State without taking some shots at some point and taking some risks, especially on the road. That game, you guys came out swinging right from the bat. I know. I think it connected on a deep ball to Quintez Cephas on the first drive. You guys were headhunting Justin Fields, got him rattled. I think forced a key turnover down by the goal line. The mindset in that game was go after him. What do you kind of just maybe remember about the different approach in that game versus the first one, where you guys did, it was an ugly. I know it was raining, I think, in Columbus that day, but that was an ugly first half before the wheels kind of came off. Was there any change from the coaches about maybe just play fast and loose, attack them, and see what happens?
Yeah, yeah. You made a great point with that, with how we've been talking about mentality wise. I mean, we went into Ohio State. I don't think the rain would have helped us in that first match either way. And we were
Okay.
kind of more so playing not to lose. I think that was
Okay.
more so the mentality, and being intimidated kind of by the bright lights a little bit of who we're playing, and they were just as talented as advertised, and you blink and they score. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
that's how talented they really are. But then when we go out in the Big Ten championship, we're absolutely throwing haymakers from the start, and I think trusting in what we do very well. No matter who was on the other side of that ball, knowing that what we do well is good enough. And we had that mindset going, through that first half, being up 21-7. Now, different story in the second half, but that mentality, and like you said, taking a few risks and capitalizing on it was huge. You have to be able to do that. If you're going to take those risks, you got to win in those situations in these games.
Last thing before we let you go here, Wisconsin's defense, like you mentioned, is probably the key to this game. They got to force turnovers. They got to at least make this game somewhat ugly for Alabama and throw them out of a rhythm. That's a lot easier said than done when you're talking about the talent that the Crimson Tide have. Whether or not Ryan Williams plays or not, we'll see. I know he's in. I mean, did he play on Saturday? You watch that game, didn't you?
He did not play. He
Okay,
didn't
so
play.
whether he plays against Wisconsin may still be up in the air. Either way, it's a tall task. Looking at it from a defensive standpoint, when you're dealing, you've played in some games where you just know, like you said, you blink, you take one false step, you blow an assignment. It's a problem. How do you play this if you're Wisconsin and maybe you're outgunned from an athletic standpoint, but you got to kind of find that balance of attacking them and making things happen versus, we can't blow any assignments. We got to be assignment sound, hat on a hat, all that good stuff.
Yeah, going back to assignment sound, I think communication is going to be key, especially in that back end. They have a lot of weapons at receiver. If you go and you check their box score from last night, I mean, there might be 15 different guys who caught the ball, and without Ryan Williams playing, so they got a lot of
Yeah.
weapons. I think communication is going to be key, from Preston Zachman, from Austin Brown, talking to their corners winning their one-on-one matchup, making it competitive, but you cannot afford to be not on the same page in one play. I mean, they can score it and take advantage of it. So communication and really going back to doing what you do really well. I would tell the front, hey, go make plays. And on the back end, we got your back to where we make sure that everything is, intact from each coverage. And that's when you're really throwing punches, but it's kind of organized chaos.
All right, that's Wisconsin at Alabama, 11 o'clock on ESPN. We'll be back with another show, presumably, I think Sunday, Monday again. We'll see how our travels go as we're both headed down to Tuscaloosa. But Colin, thanks again, and safe travels down to Alabama.
Yeah, you too. Probably see you in the trenches over there.
All right.